My aunt claimed I was too young to handle my inheritance, but I discovered she was hiding her debts, and then I never expected my own family to steal from me. But here I am, writing this, after uncovering one of the most painful betrayals of my life. My name is Lily, and I'm 22 years old. My brother, Josh, is 25. Our parents passed away in a car accident when I was 12, and Josh was 15. It was the worst thing that had ever happened to us. We lost our home, our childhood, our sense of security, all of it, gone in an instant. Our Aunt Margaret, my mom's older sister, took us in, and for years, I thought she had saved us. I thought she had stepped up to take care of us when we needed her the most. But I was wrong. For as long as I can remember, Margaret had been strict, controlling, and always on edge. Even as a kid, I knew she wasn't exactly the warm and fuzzy type, but she did provide for us. We had a roof over our heads, food on the table, and clothes on our backs. That was enough, right? I didn't start questioning things until I turned 22. It all started when I overheard a conversation between Josh and Aunt Margaret. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when I heard their voices in the living room. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose, but the tone in Josh's voice made me pause. "You know she's legally entitled to that money now, right?" he said. I frowned. "What money?" Margaret scoffed. "She's not ready for that kind of responsibility." I peeked around the corner and saw her sitting stiffly in her chair, arms crossed. Josh was standing, glaring at her. "That's not your decision," he argued. "She's still young, still reckless. You and I both know she'll waste it." "Waste what?" At that moment, Josh's eyes flickered toward the doorway and landed on me. "Lily," he said, his voice shifting. "Come here." Margaret stiffened, but didn't stop me from walking into the room. "What's going on?" I asked, crossing my arms. Josh exhaled sharply. "You should have access to your inheritance by now." I blinked. "What inheritance?" Silence. Margaret shot him a glare. "Lily, sweetheart, don't let your brother fill your head with nonsense." But Josh wasn't backing down. "Mom and Dad left money for us. For both of us. I got mine when I turned 21. You should have gotten yours last year." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. What?" Margaret's face hardened. "You're too young to handle that kind of money, Lily. Trust me, I'm doing what's best for you." I stared at her, my mind racing. "But it's my money." Margaret sighed, standing up. "We'll revisit this when you're older, okay? When you're more mature." I glanced at Josh, my heart pounding. He was shaking his head. "Lily, don't let her do this," he said. Margaret narrowed her eyes. "I raised you too. I kept you safe. I made sacrifices. I have always done what's best for this family, but I wasn't a kid anymore." And something about the way she was acting made me realize this wasn't about my maturity. This was about control, and I wasn't about to let her win. That night, I barely slept. I kept tossing and turning, my brain spinning with questions. Why would Margaret lie about my inheritance? What was she doing with the money? Was it still there? I needed answers. The next morning, I knocked on Josh's apartment door. He barely had time to greet me before I blurted out, "How much did Mom and Dad leave us?" Josh rubbed his face, clearly still frustrated from the night before. "Each of us was supposed to get about $250,000. I nearly choked. "What?" "That's what the lawyer told me when I turned 21. That's what I got. $250,000. And Margaret had kept mine from me?" Josh sighed. "I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed she had some kind of legal control over your portion. But when I double-checked the will, I realized there's nothing in it that says she can hold on to your money after you turn 21. My stomach twisted. Then what the hell is she doing? Josh's jaw tightened. That's what we need to find out. That afternoon, I stayed at Josh's place while he went to work. I spent hours searching for any legal loophole that might explain why Margaret was withholding my inheritance. But nothing added up. Then, as I was about to close my laptop, my phone buzzed. It was Margaret. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" "Lily," she said, her voice unusually soft. "I just wanted to check in on you." I narrowed my eyes. "Really?" A pause. Then, "I know yesterday was overwhelming for you. I didn't mean to upset you." I stayed silent, letting her talk. Money changes people, she continued. You have to understand. I only want what's best for you. I swallowed the anger rising in my throat. Then give me my money. She sighed. Not yet. You're not ready. I clenched my fists. That's not your decision. Before she could respond, I heard something in the background. Another voice, muffled but urgent. I need that payment, Margaret. You're already behind. Margaret gasped. I have to go, she said quickly, and the call cut off. I stared at my phone, my pulse racing. Who was she talking to? And why did it sound like she owed someone money? I had a bad feeling, a really bad feeling, and I was going to get to the bottom of it. After that phone call with Margaret, I knew something was wrong. The way she cut the call short, the panic in her voice. It wasn't just about me being too young for my inheritance. She was hiding something, and if she was in trouble, I needed to find out why. Josh was just as shaken as I was when I told him about what I'd heard. She's in debt, he said immediately. It makes sense now. She probably drained your inheritance to pay off whatever she owes. I felt sick. But how could she even do that? That money wasn't hers. Josh ran a hand through his hair. She was our legal guardian. She had access to all of our finances. The real question is, how much did she take? That was when I knew we needed a professional. The next morning, Josh and I went to see Daniel, the lawyer who had handled our parents' estate. He was a tall, serious-looking man in his 40s, with graying hair and a firm handshake. I had never met him before. Margaret had always been the one who handled everything legal when we were growing up. So, let me get this straight, Daniel said, glancing between us. You're telling me Margaret never gave you access to your inheritance after you turned 21? I shook my head. Not a cent. His expression darkened. He opened a thick folder on his desk and flipped through several documents. Your parents' will was very clear. The inheritance was to be split equally, with each of you gaining full control of your share upon turning 21. No conditions, no exceptions. Josh and I exchanged looks. Then why does she still have it? I asked. Daniel hesitated. That is a good question. Legally, she should have transferred full control of your funds by now. But if she forged documents or kept the bank under the impression that she was still the legal trustee, they might not have questioned it, he added. If she also claimed she was still covering your expenses, the withdrawals wouldn't have seemed suspicious right away. He exhaled slowly. I need to do some digging, but if what you're saying is true, this could be a serious legal violation. My stomach twisted. I wasn't sure if I wanted to scream or cry. Josh leaned forward. Can you find out if the money is still there? Daniel nodded. I'll check with the bank, but if she's moved it or spent it, you'll need to take legal action to recover it. Legal action. Against our aunt. The idea made me sick, but what choice did I have? As we were about to leave, Daniel gave me a careful look. Lily, I know this is overwhelming, but be careful. If Margaret really is in financial trouble, she might not take kindly to you digging into this. I swallowed hard. I'll be careful, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Margaret's phone call. Who had she been talking to? And what exactly did she owe money for? I decided to do something reckless. I went to Margaret's house. She wasn't home. Her car was gone, and all the lights were off. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the spare key I still had from when I lived there. I knew it was wrong to go inside without her permission, but I needed answers. The moment I stepped in, a wave of unease washed over me. The house was too quiet. I went straight to her home office. I had never been allowed inside when I was younger, but now, standing here, I realized why. Papers were everywhere, messy stacks of bills, letters, and financial statements. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Past due notices, debt collection warnings, a foreclosure threat from the bank. Margaret was drowning in debt. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A bank statement with my name on it. It showed large withdrawals from what was supposed to be my inheritance account. One withdrawal for $50,000. Another for $100,000. The most recent one, $75,000, just 2 months ago. She had been taking my money. I grabbed the papers and snapped pictures of everything with my phone. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might throw up. Then I heard a noise. The front door. I froze. Margaret was home. Panic shot through me. I shoved the papers back into place and slipped into the hallway, pressing myself against the wall. Footsteps. Getting closer. I needed to get out. Now. I moved as quickly and quietly as I could toward the back door. Just as I reached it, I heard her voice. Lily? I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted out the back door and sprinted down the street, my pulse hammering in my ears. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the keys into the ignition. As I sped away, my phone started ringing. It was Margaret. I didn't answer. I didn't know what I was going to do next. But one thing was clear. Margaret had stolen my inheritance, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I could hear her footsteps in the hallway, getting closer. I didn't think. I just moved. My heart pounded as I shoved the last paper back into Margaret's desk and bolted toward the door. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle. Too slow. Margaret's shadow stretched across the hallway wall before I could make it out. I barely had time to react before her voice cut through the silence like a knife. Lily? Shit. I did the only thing I could. I ran. I shoved the door open, nearly crashing into her in the process. Margaret stumbled back, her eyes going wide with shock. What the hell are you doing in my office? She yelled. But I didn't stop to answer. I sprinted down the hall toward the back door, my pulse hammering. The house felt smaller than I remembered. Every hallway, every doorway, a trap waiting to snap shut. Margaret recovered quickly. I heard her feet pounding behind me, her voice laced with fury. Lily, stop. Like hell I would. I reached the kitchen, skidding across the tile floor. The back door was only a few feet away, so close I could almost taste the cool night air outside. Then, a sharp yank. Margaret grabbed the back of my hoodie, pulling me hard. I stumbled, nearly falling as she spun me around. Her face was wild, eyes blazing, breath sharp and ragged. What do you think you're doing? She hissed. Sneaking into my office? I jerked back, trying to break free, but her grip was like iron. Think, Lily. Think. My eyes darted to the counter behind her. A cluttered mess of unopened mail, keys, and a ceramic mug. I lunged, grabbed it, and threw it. The mug smashed against the floor, shards flying everywhere. Margaret flinched, her grip loosening just enough for me to rip away from her grasp. I didn't waste a second. I threw myself at the door, twisted the lock with shaking fingers, and shoved it open. Cold air hit me like a slap. Margaret let out a frustrated scream behind me. You're making a huge mistake, Lily. I didn't look back. I ran, barefoot against the pavement, heart slamming against my ribs. I sprinted toward my car, parked 2 houses down, my breath coming in sharp gasps. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. The car beeped as I yanked open the door and threw myself inside. Just as I slammed it shut, I saw Margaret come bursting out of the house, her face twisted in pure rage. For a terrifying second, I thought she would chase me, that she would come tearing down the driveway like some unhinged demon. But she didn't. She just stood there, panting, watching me. And then, she smiled. Not a normal smile. Not an I'm angry smile. A knowing smile. Like she wasn't afraid. Like she still thought she had already won. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't wait to find out what it meant. I jammed the key into the ignition, floored the gas, and tore down the street, away from her. Away from whatever twisted game she thought she was playing. But as I drove, one thought burned into my brain. She's not done. Not even close. And neither was I. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those bank statements, those overdue bills, proof that Margaret had stolen from me. My stomach twisted every time I remembered the look on Josh's face when I told him everything. She took your money, he said, pacing back and forth in his apartment. How much? At least $225,000. Maybe more. Josh ran a hand over his face, breathing heavily. I knew she was controlling, but this is fraud. Theft. She's a criminal. I nodded, gripping my phone. We need to do something. Josh stopped pacing. We need to go back to Daniel. With proof. I hesitated. There's more. His eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. I was there when she came home. She knows I was in her office. And she's been calling me nonstop ever since. Josh cursed under his breath. She's panicking. She knows she's caught. My phone vibrated again. Margaret. I stared at it, my chest tightening. What if she does something crazy? Josh exhaled. Then we make sure she doesn't get the chance. We agreed that I wouldn't answer Margaret's calls until we spoke with Daniel. But the next morning, she showed up at my apartment. I heard the pounding on my door before I even got out of bed. Lily, open this door right now. My stomach twisted. Josh had spent the night on my couch, just in case she pulled something like this. He was already up, standing near the door with his arms crossed. What do you want to do? He whispered. I took a deep breath. Let her in. Josh opened the door, and Margaret stormed inside, her face red with anger. You broke into my house? She snapped, glaring at me. I folded my arms. And you stole my inheritance. Margaret's face twitched. I did no such thing. Josh pulled out his phone. Lily took pictures. We know you've been withdrawing money from her account. Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. Her gaze flickered between us, her expression unreadable. Then, suddenly, she laughed. I blinked. What's so funny? Margaret sighed, shaking her head. You two have no idea what you're talking about. Josh scoffed. Oh, really? Then explain why Lily's inheritance account is missing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Margaret's jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, fear. I didn't steal from you, she said finally. I borrowed it. I clenched my fists. Without telling me? Without asking? I raised you, she snapped. I sacrificed everything for you. Do you think it was easy, taking in 2 kids after your parents died? Do you think I had money just lying around? Josh shook his head. So that's it? You drained Lily's inheritance because you couldn't handle your finances? Margaret exhaled sharply. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You lied to me. You made me think I had to wait until I was older, when really, you were using my money to cover your debts. Margaret looked away. You don't understand. Josh clenched his jaw. Then make us understand. Margaret hesitated. For a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer. But then she whispered, I didn't just lose money. I lost everything. Margaret sat down on my couch, rubbing her temples. For the first time, she looked exhausted. I made some bad investments, she admitted. After your parents died, I had their estate money under my control. I thought, if I invested it wisely, I could grow it. Make sure you two had even more money when you got older. My stomach sank. What did you invest in? Margaret sighed. A business deal. A friend convinced me to put money into a real estate project. It was supposed to be a sure thing. Josh crossed his arms. But it wasn't. She nodded. The whole thing was a scam. I lost nearly everything before I realized what was happening. And when I tried to pull out, it was too late. I shook my head in disbelief. So you took my inheritance to cover your losses? I had no choice. Margaret snapped. I had debt collectors coming after me. I was drowning, Lily. What was I supposed to do? Josh's voice was ice cold. Not steal from your own family. Margaret's face twisted in anger. You owe me. After everything I've done for you, after all the sacrifices I made. No, I interrupted, my voice shaking. You owe us. That money wasn't yours, Margaret. It was never yours. Silence. For the first time, she looked small, defeated. Josh exhaled, running a hand through his hair. We're getting our money back. One way or another. Margaret's eyes darted between us. You wouldn't. I swallowed hard. We're going to Daniel. We're taking legal action. Margaret stood abruptly. If you do this, if you go after me legally, I'll lose everything. I stared at her, feeling the weight of her words. And then I thought about my parents, about how they had worked hard their entire lives to give Josh and me a secure future, about how Margaret had destroyed that security because of her own greed and stupidity. I guess you should have thought about that before you stole from us, I said. Margaret's face twisted with something unreadable. Anger, fear, regret? Maybe all three. Then, without another word, she stormed out of the apartment. Josh and I sat in silence for a long time after she left. Finally, he spoke. You okay? I exhaled slowly. Not really. He nodded. Me neither. I ran a hand over my face. Do you think she'll fight us on this? Josh frowned. I don't know. But we can't back down now. I nodded. We go to Daniel first thing tomorrow. But Margaret wasn't done fighting. Because the next morning, she was gone. Margaret was gone. Josh and I had spent the whole day preparing to confront her. We had bank statements, legal documents, and Daniel, our lawyer, ready to take action. But when we went to her house, we found it completely empty. No furniture. No clothes. No Margaret. She had disappeared. Josh stood in the middle of the vacant living room, turning in slow circles. She knew we were coming. His voice was tight with anger. I swallowed hard. She must have run after she saw me in her office. We had planned to corner her with legal threats, force her to admit what she'd done, and get our money back. But we had underestimated her. Margaret wasn't just stealing. She was covering her tracks. Josh pulled out his phone and started making calls. First to Daniel, then to the bank, then, reluctantly, to the police. I could hear the frustration in his voice as he explained the situation over and over again. But no one could give us an immediate answer. Margaret had withdrawn large amounts of money over time, and now she was gone. I checked the records, Daniel said, flipping through the documents. It looks like she started making small withdrawals when you were a minor, claiming they were for your living expenses. Once you turned 21, she used the same justification and nobody thought to verify it. The police weren't calling it a crime yet, but Josh and I knew better. We needed to find her. That night, I couldn't sit still. I kept thinking about Margaret's debts. If she owed money, she wouldn't just disappear without settling things. Someone, somewhere, knew where she had gone. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called the bank myself. I expected them to stonewall me, but when I mentioned that I was working with a lawyer, the bank manager, Susan, agreed to meet me the next morning. When I arrived, she looked hesitant, but after a long pause, she finally spoke. There's something I probably shouldn't be telling you, she said, lowering her voice. But I've known your family for years, and I don't like what Margaret has been doing. I leaned forward. What did she do? Susan sighed. Margaret took out several personal loans in the last few years. Big ones. At first, she used her own credit, but when she maxed that out, she started using. She even refinanced part of the estate to buy herself more time, Susan added. That's probably why no one caught on. She moved money through different accounts to make it look like she was just restructuring finances. My inheritance, I finished, my stomach twisting. She nodded. But here's the thing, Susan continued. A week ago, she made a very large withdrawal from what was left of your trust fund. I stiffened. How much? Almost everything that remained. $90,000. Josh, who had come with me, cursed under his breath. Susan hesitated before adding, and then she wired it to an account out of state. My heart pounded. Where? Susan lowered her voice. Texas. Josh and I exchanged looks. Margaret had always hated Texas. She said it was too hot, too loud, too far from civilized life. So why would she go there? There was only one explanation. She was meeting someone. Daniel managed to get in touch with a private investigator, Mark, who specialized in financial fraud cases. He was an ex-detective, gruff and direct, and within 2 days, he had a lead. Margaret had checked into a cheap motel in Austin, Texas. She paid in cash, Mark told us over the phone, but I pulled security footage. It's her, all right. And she's not alone. I froze. Who's with her? Mark hesitated. A younger guy. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. I ran his face through a few databases, and I think I've got him. Josh tensed. Who is he? Mark sighed. Tyler. Her son. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Margaret had a son. My cousin. And she had never told us. I didn't even know she had a kid. She had always told me and Josh that we were her only family. And yet, here she was, running away with him, taking our money to support him. Josh slammed his fist against the table. She lied about everything. I was shaking. She was never planning to give me my inheritance back. Josh's jaw clenched. No. She was planning to take everything and disappear. A lump formed in my throat. Margaret had raised me. She had fed me, clothed me, made me believe that she cared about me. But in the end, I was just a bank account to her. I wasn't her niece. I was just a way to keep herself and her secret son afloat. I clenched my fists. No, I said, my voice hard. She's not getting away with this. Josh nodded. Then let's go get her. Josh and I stood outside room 214 of the rundown motel, our hearts pounding in sync. The neon sign flickered overhead, casting a sickly glow on the peeling door. Inside, Margaret was hiding, and I wasn't leaving without answers. Josh knocked hard. No response. He knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Josh exchanged a look with me, then exhaled sharply. Screw this. Before I could stop him, he kicked the door in. Bang. The flimsy lock snapped, and the door swung open with a crack, revealing Margaret and Tyler inside. Margaret shot up from the bed, eyes wide with shock. What the hell? Tyler was already moving. He lunged for the duffel bag on the floor. Josh didn't hesitate. He grabbed him, slamming him back against the wall. Not so fast, asshole. Tyler struggled, twisting against Josh's grip. Get off me. Margaret screamed. Stop it. Let him go. But I wasn't focused on Tyler anymore. My eyes locked onto something across the room. A stack of envelopes spilling out of the duffel bag. Margaret's bank statements. Proof. I darted forward, snatching the papers before she could react. Margaret lunged for me. Lily, Too late. I scanned the documents, my breath catching. Bank transfers. Cash withdrawals. Over $200,000, gone. She had wiped everything out. My hands shook as I looked up. You stole from me, I whispered. Margaret's face twisted with desperation. I had no choice. Josh let out a bitter laugh, still holding Tyler pinned. Bullshit. You had a choice. You chose to run. Margaret moved fast. 1 second, she was pleading. The next, she grabbed the motel lamp and hurled it at me. I barely ducked in time. Crash. Glass exploded across the floor. Lily, move. Josh shouted. I didn't get the chance. Margaret shoved me, hard, and I went stumbling back, crashing into the motel dresser. My vision blurred for a second as pain shot up my spine. By the time I regained focus, Margaret was already grabbing the duffel bag and making for the door. Josh saw it too. He yanked Tyler back, letting him go just long enough to chase after Margaret. But Tyler wasn't done fighting. He elbowed Josh in the ribs, knocking him off balance, and lunged toward me. I saw it coming too late. Bam. Tyler tackled me, sending us both crashing to the ground. The wind rushed out of my lungs as I hit the floor, his full weight crushing me. He scrambled to grab the bank statements, but I held on tight, twisting away. Give it back, he snarled. Over my dead body. I gasped, kicking out hard. My knee slammed into his stomach. Tyler let out a choked gasp and rolled off me just long enough for me to crawl away. I grabbed the motel chair, swinging it around between us as a makeshift shield. Meanwhile, Josh had recovered. He grabbed Margaret's wrist just as she reached the door. You're not going anywhere, he growled. Margaret screeched. Let me go. But Josh was stronger. He twisted her arm behind her back, forcing her against the door. Margaret thrashed. You think you can stop me? You think you can fix this? It's too late. Tyler was back on his feet. His eyes darted between his mother and the door, panic setting in. Then, he made a choice. He grabbed the motel TV remote off the table and hurled it straight at Josh's head. Thud. Josh stumbled just enough for Margaret to break free. She shoved past him, lunging for the door. Tyler followed. I saw what was happening a second too late. The door flew open. They were running. I scrambled to my feet, racing after them, but by the time I hit the motel parking lot, they were gone. A car peeled out, tires screeching. Margaret was escaping. Josh stumbled out behind me, panting, holding his head. Damn it, he muttered. I clenched my fists, watching their car disappear into the night. I had the bank statements. I had the proof. But Margaret was still out there. And this wasn't over. I never imagined I'd be chasing my own aunt across state lines. But there I was, sitting in a rental car outside a dingy motel in Austin, Texas. Josh sat next to me, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Mark, the private investigator, had sent us the exact location. We had everything we needed, proof of the stolen money, legal backing from Daniel, and enough anger to fuel a confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for. Margaret was inside. And so was Tyler, her secret son. I took a deep breath. Are we really doing this? Josh nodded. Yeah, we are. We got out of the car and walked straight to room 214. I raised my fist and knocked hard. Silence. Then, the door cracked open. A man, early 30s, scruffy beard, tired eyes, peeked out. Tyler. I had never seen him before, but the resemblance to Margaret was unmistakable. His eyes darted between me and Josh. Who the hell are you? Josh didn't hesitate. He shoved the door open and stepped inside, forcing Tyler backward. I followed close behind. Margaret was sitting on the edge of the bed, mid-sip from a cheap motel coffee cup. When she saw us, her face went pale. Lily. Her voice was hoarse. Josh. For a split second, I saw something in her eyes. Guilt? Fear? Then it was gone. What are you doing here? She demanded. Standing up, I threw the stack of printed bank statements onto the motel bed. You know why we're here. She barely glanced at the papers. This is a misunderstanding. Josh scoffed. A misunderstanding? You stole from Lily. You ran. Margaret straightened her spine, the defensive tone slipping into her voice. I did what I had to do. I felt a lump in my throat. No. You did what was best for you. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. You don't understand. Josh cut her off. Oh, we understand perfectly. You were drowning in debt, and instead of dealing with it like an adult, you drained Lily's inheritance and ran off with him. He jabbed a finger toward Tyler. Tyler, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. Hey, I didn't take anything from you. I turned to him, my hands shaking. Do you even know where that money came from? He hesitated. His eyes flickered to Margaret, and suddenly, I knew. She hadn't told him. Margaret sighed. Tyler, don't listen to them. Your mother stole my inheritance, I said sharply. Money my dead parents left for me. And now, she's using it to protect you. Tyler's face twisted with confusion. Wait, what? I pointed at the bank statements. Every withdrawal. Every transfer. That was supposed to be my money. And now it's gone. Margaret's expression hardened. I raised you, she snapped. I sacrificed everything for you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You didn't raise me out of love. You raised me because I was your personal piggy bank. Margaret flinched. For the first time, she had nothing to say. Josh crossed his arms. Here's what's going to happen. We already filed a case against you. The bank has frozen the remaining funds, and if you don't cooperate, the police will be here within hours. Margaret's eyes widened. You wouldn't. I met her gaze, my voice cold. Try me. She looked between me and Josh, breathing hard. I don't have the money. My stomach dropped. What? It's gone, she admitted, looking away. The debts were bigger than I let on. I had no choice. No choice. Josh barked. You had a choice. You could have told us. We could have helped. Margaret scoffed. Helped? You wouldn't have understood. I clenched my fists. You're right. I don't understand how someone can look their own family in the eye and steal from them. Silence. Then Tyler did something unexpected. He walked over to the bank statements and picked them up. He scanned the pages, his jaw tightening with each number. Then, slowly, he turned to Margaret. Mom, he said quietly, did you really do this? Margaret's lips parted, but no words came out. Tyler let out a bitter laugh. Jesus. And here I thought you brought me out here because you wanted to see me. He shook his head. But you were just running. Margaret took a shaky breath. I did it for us. Tyler's voice was hollow. No, you did it for you. For the first time, Margaret looked truly defeated. We left before the police arrived. We didn't need to see them take her away. In the end, Margaret was arrested for fraud and financial theft. Tyler, as far as we knew, cut ties with her completely. The money, what little was left, was returned to me, but most of it was gone. Daniel helped us build a case to recover some of the stolen assets, but the truth was, I'd never see the full amount again. Luckily, the court placed a freeze on her remaining assets, Daniel told us later. If she has any hidden accounts or property under her name, we might be able to reclaim some of it. That money, the future my parents had tried to protect for me, was gone forever. But as Josh and I drove away from that motel, I realized something. Margaret may have stolen my inheritance, but she wasn't going to steal my life. I was free from her control, and for the first time in years, that was enough.